All right, everybody. I want to welcome you to the third Pathworking class. This is the Path of Resh that we're going to be talking about today. I noticed one or two of you are new today, and I haven't yet put up the second class on my site to download. I have made an MP3 of it. I just haven't had time to put it up. And also, Alex, I know that this is coming. I have the image, and when I send out the links to the recordings of this class and the previous one, I will send. I'll attach that picture. It's much ado about nothing. I'm afraid that you're going to go, oh, it's just a little symbol. But so anyway, let's jump in and discuss the path of Shin and people's experiences with it over this past couple of weeks. The path of Shin was about letting go of some of your fears and stuff and habit patterns and so forth. And the path of Resh is going to have some similar aspects to it. They both lead to Hod, and they both take you through a transformational journey through your consciousness. But I want to know people's specific experiences with the path of Shin. So go ahead, jump in, the most brave person to talk about their experiences. While people are typing, I want to mention a couple of things that people, actually one person asked me these two questions, and I wanted to talk about both of them for just briefly. Good morning. The recordings use a specific sequence of divine names in them that relate to each of the Sephiroth and the different planetary energies and so forth. And someone was asking why I was using one particular name over another form of that name. And I just want to say, in general, I have deferred to the Golden Dawn system for the divine name usage. I know that there is some variance out there, and there's always been variance a little bit here and there in the names that have been used over the centuries. So I've used the Golden Dawn versions, and that's just because those are the ones that I'm the most familiar with. And as I've said in previous ones of these classes, I'm not a huge stickler for tradition. I see these as being something that is more evolutionary and revolutionary rather than something that is attempting to attach itself to tradition. So my usages and my specific ways of approaching this have to do with my own observations, my own feelings about things. And in cases where I don't have those, I've deferred to the Golden Dawn as being sort of the main arm of the Western mystery tradition today. And so I'm going to take a moment and I'm going to look over because there's the chat screen has been filling up with stuff. I'm just going to read what people are saying. Brandine says, it was amazing, left me in a disoriented state for a while, but amazing transformations. Alex says, for me, it was kind of opening up a machine or something. It looks like a big scary monster, but you open the cover and can see how it works. And you can either take it apart or realign it. That was the spaces between the meditations. Graham says, how difficult is it to stop thinking about thinking and just experience the process as a participating observer without interfering? That's a good question. I'm just going to read Rebecca's statement, and then I'll answer your question, Graham. Breaking free from Rebecca, I don't remember if you were the one who said Becca or the other one was the one who said Becca, so I'm just going to say Rebecca, I'm sorry. Rebecca with a C. Breaking free from the barriers of fear has been awesome. Verbally stating my control over the body and mind has me taking less meds for pain and has helped me overcome many barriers to diving into the things I want and need to do. Well, that's fantastic. Graham's question about difficult to stop thinking about thinking. Now, the more that you enter into that trance state, the more that you enter into the state of engagement with the process, the more that the thinker is going to step aside. But it's always going to be a component of things, unless you're asleep. There's an invasion of that thinker that disrupts every meditative process at some point or another. And in fact, in many ways, that's the work that you're actually doing is observing that conscious mind energy and moving past it. Now, the more that continues to interfere, the harder it is going to be as we move along, and the more that these programs are going to seem more like a practice than an actual experience. So the more that you can let yourself engage in the process and not feel the need to analyze, the more that you're going to move swiftly through this as a true spiritual experience. The thinker is not your enemy per se, but it's something that needs to kind of be put aside while you're engaging in these practices at the time that you're engaging them. The method for doing this is simply to focus intently upon what it is that you're doing. The more you're focusing on the task at hand, the less that you're able to engage the thinker. And the more that you're considering it to be an important and blissful thing. Like, for instance, if you are trying to create something beautiful and you're truly engaged in the process, you aren't the thinker isn't engaged. If you're trying to escape from something that's scary, the thinker isn't engaged. When we're fully immersed in anything that we're working on, the thinker kind of steps aside for a moment and reemerges to analyze and perhaps to criticize what we've done after the fact. But the more tightly you focus on that, and that's one form of of the samadhi that's described by the various Buddhist and tantric yogic practitioners. Is the intent focus on what one's doing? It's considered to be the sort of outward version of that. Like a surgeon is in samadhi when they're engaged in that surgical moment. They come out of it. So Dave Ellman, the hypnotherapist, one of the sort of important hypnotherapists of the 20th century, his definition of hypnosis was the removal of the limiting of attention and the removal of the critical factor. And it's the critical factor that's really what you're talking about, Graham, as far as I can tell. And the way to remove that is simply to pay attention to the process and to limit your awareness to what specifically you're being asked to do in any kind of consciousness exercise. I think the thing that a lot of people struggle with in consciousness exercises is, am I doing it correctly, or am I doing it, is there some way that I can improve what I'm doing? I think that's the main question that I asked when I first started engaging these sorts of things, and that I hear of people asking. And it's a fair question, but it's one to be asked after the fact rather than while one's in it. That's one of the benefits of this particular, structure that we're doing here, is that I would like you to do these exercises more than, as often as you can during this week, so that you can engage them again and again and begin to, really immerse yourself in them as much as possible and to pull more out of them each time. Now, one of the other questions that I think that comes up for some people engaging in programs like these ones, where there is a beginning part that is relatively the same from recording to recording, is when am I going to get to the meat of this, or how long am I going to engage in this part of this process, or is this going to is this going to take so long that I don't get the questions of being bored with the part that one's familiar with. And as I suggested, I believe last week, the medicine for that is really to try to make each experience of the parts that are the same in the different recordings more powerful than the last time. In other words, engage more fully in it each time that you're listening to it. So the chat has been filling up again, so I'm going to take a look at it again. Brandine says, I experienced a pillar of fire that I stood in, and everything disintegrated within me. No, yeah, I mean that was kind of the intention of the program, and I'm glad that you've got a real strong visceral. Now you see, Graham, asking yourself, what parts of me are supposed to be burned up, or am I experiencing this strongly enough? Those sorts of questions aren't relevant to that process at that time. So the more that you can just sort of concentrate on experiencing it as fully as possible, the less that you're going to get interference. Rurik says, every tradition was at some time something new. I assume you're referring to my comments on the Kabbalistic traditionalism. Robin says, I'm sorry if I'm mildly editing your statements. I'm a sensory type of person, so for me, the meditation caused real burning feelings, allowed myself to use that feeling to burn off old unwanted habits. And that's exactly what I'd like you to do as much as possible when engaging this particular recording, is to actually feel a sense of the uncomfort of burning up, and even the uncomfort of letting something go that you've been attached to for a long time. And that's something that we all face at the end of our lives, and that we all face at the end of each phase of our lives. When we graduate from different levels of school, we move to a new level, and we have to let go of that old identity and move into the new one. And so in some ways, that's exactly what this process is engaging on a spiritual level. Kevin says, it transformed me within myself, felt it deep within. Graham says, I sense there is a knack here that maybe I'm not quite getting yet. I think that there's certainly a knack. I don't think that it's something that it requires any great shakes. It's just sort of a willingness to play along and to put yourself as wholly as possible into what you're doing. It's similar to, say, taking an improv class or something like that, where you engage the scene as fully as possible when you're into it. And the more that you engage in that sort of stuff, the more that you lose yourself in that moment and connect with aspects of your consciousness that otherwise aren't available. And that's very much the case in any kind of theatrical or presentational thing, but in a spiritual thing, it's much more powerful and personal. Rebecca from Alabama says, I missed the other classes. I am a bit lost. Is this the third class? You mentioned the second class. Is the first one still downloadable? I tried to download it at some point. I had the impression it wasn't available after a bit. I could be wrong. Rebecca, that class, the first class is still available. The second class is an MP3 that's on the hard drive of this computer I'm sitting in front of, but I haven't uploaded it to the internet. I'm hopefully going to upload both this class and that second class up to the internet at some point today or this evening or tomorrow morning at the latest. And so all of those classes will be available to you. And as I said in the second class, if you want to stay with the level of the class, you would need to now work on all three path workings within the next couple of weeks. Luckily, right now, these first classes are being spread 2 weeks apart because I'm having various work conflicts with them. So there's a little extra time for you to catch up if you want to. Also, it's okay for you to be a class behind and just continue coming to the class and and discussing it, but then working on the previous one, listening to the recording of the previous one, and working on that one. As you move forward along with everyone one step behind, it's no problem. Graham says, I had quite a powerful emotional response to the opening invocation last night for the first time. This did seem to reduce the critical part somewhat. That's fantastic. That's exactly what I want. And the thing about that opening invocation is that I created it to be both an invocation of the divine into oneself and an induction into an altered state of consciousness at the same time. So I'm glad that you are getting that benefit from it. I think the knack in terms of that particular thing is that some people have trouble entering into an altered state when they're verbalizing. I think it's an incredibly important skill to have if you're wanting to be a visionary occultist, because there's there's lots of places where it's important to be able to be in an altered state and yet to be able to communicate with people who are working with you. Okay, so before I answer this, Robin, I want to speak to one other thing, which was actually related to a question that you asked me over the week, which relates to the invocation and the placement of the Tree of Life sort of in the body, which there is a tradition both from the Golden Dawn and from some older Jewish sources, although it's much less so in those Jewish sources because they weren't really as interested in the sort of magical aspect of things, but of placing the Tree of Life into one's body, where Keter is here, Chokmah and Bina are here, and the other Sephiroth are sort of aligned along with Geburah is either here or here, and Tiferet is in the heart, and so forth, so that the pillars of the tree are maintained in the body. And there were a couple of reasons why I left that. One of those is, as Robin mentions in his question yet to come, that Robin, you're a girl, right? I think I said his just now, but there were two people whose gender was confusing to me in there. Yeah, okay. Due to their name. Okay, so the reason that I didn't do that was, one, because there are different sources that place the different sides of the tree in different places on the body, and I think that there's good reason for both. And I wanted my programs to be about balance rather than creating imbalance, which the different placing the different Sephiroth on the sides of the body can cause you to become sort of unbalanced in one way or another, depending on your natural inclinations and the way that you go with your energy. And I didn't want to do that. And I also like the idea of the Tree of Life with the different pillars, because it creates relationships between them. But I don't know that in our bodies that's as useful for me with this particular program. And I liked doing things in a progression downward with the music. It seemed the right thing to do was to just do it along a linear line rather than going back and forth with it, largely because of the tones and wanting to relate the tones to the different sort of layers and chakras of the body. So now Robin continues, deferring to Golden Dawn tradition, if when the higher self, HGA, etc., gives a person a particular way to use something, as with my unusual pronunciation of Tetragrammaton, is it better to adopt it at that time or better to continue to hold the tradition and the power of the egregore? All right. I mean, that's a question that I think can only be answered in one's own experience. I wouldn't want to answer that for you. I certainly think there are times when either can be the case. I mean, one can never be sure 100% that one is speaking to the entity that one is thinking that they're speaking to and receiving something. So someone could be, something could be giving you a bad message that would be taking you further and further away from where you want to go. But I think that there's a barometer or a compass that kind of leads us to understand what exactly is happening when we do something. If you do something and it starts to make you feel weird or bad, it's probably best to stick with the traditional way. If you do something and it really makes you feel, aha, I'm really connecting with something powerful here, then it's useful to continue with it. But again, only you can decide that in yourself. Xavier from Miami says, RE Pathworking in the Tarot. For over a year, I've had success in astrally moving through various major arcana images and experiencing fascinating landscapes and visions. My question is, could I also incorporate evocation through pathworking by way of the tarot? Um, I'm not sure quite what you mean by that. Like evoking the entities of the tarot, or using the tarot as a sort of a talismanic tool when you're doing evocations. Give me a little more information about which. By the way, I think both of those are definitely something you could do. So Graham says, yes, I didn't vocalize it first until you mentioned the importance of that last time. It really does help a lot. Oh, terrific! I'm glad that you're getting benefit from that. Robin confirms that she's a girl. Alex from Edmonton, yeah, it's a boy, yes. Maybe those were the two that I was confused about last time. The idea of coming down the middle pillar, Robin says, gives me that sense of balance you mentioned. Thank you. And she noticed that with the tones too. Thank you for your responses. Thank you. You're welcome. If you follow, Alex says, if you follow the tradition of the HGA, at some point you have to trust your own internal resources over any tradition. Yeah, I mean that's really the truth. But the question is, are you being guided by your HGA, or are you being guided by some other lower impulse that's masquerading in HGA robes? That's the tough thing. And I think if you look at the modern occult movement, you see a lot of that question being played with along the way. One other thing that I wanted to mention here before we start moving into discussing the next path is something that I have been meaning to bring up, but I guess this is the right week to do so, which is that it's possible for you to use a Eucharistic aspect to these path workings as well. And what I mean by that is, if you're sitting in a place, and again, this doesn't need to be an elaborate ritual space, but if it is an elaborate ritual space, that's fine as well. But you can have a beverage and a food that that relates to the energy of the sephira that you're going to. In this case, it would be Hod, and you could place that food on your altar, and then at the end of the whole ritual, or the meditation, I say, you eat that food so that you bring that energy in directly into your body that you've created the charged relationship with through the path working. And that's something that can be very powerful and really ground your work in some ways, and it's quite popular among certain people, particularly in pagan groups. You know, that idea has really taken hold. But it's something that you might want to consider adding into your thing, and you don't need to do it all the time, but it might be something that would be useful the first time that you work a new path, or the last time that you work a new path, something like that. Xavier says, by the way, your Newcomb has opened up a whole new way to work my rituals. Astrolagging accomplished 10 times more than a physical ritual setting. Thank you. Sure, Xavier, and that's funny that relates in some way to what I was saying, which is that what we do in this more modern visionary kind of magic takes us out of the traditional temple settings in some cases, but it's useful to have something that brings that work into the physical, and so Eucharist is one of the things that is useful in that way. Also, a talismanic object of some sort can be useful too. Alex says, that's really interesting about the Eucharist. I'm thinking, what beverages and foods correspond to the various sephirot? This is something that has been, if you look on the internet, you can find a lot of people's ideas on this. There's all kinds of different things. You know, the Ayurvedic tastes are one approach. So you know, you'd think about, because there's 6 tastes, which correspond to the 6 planets, I think, other than the sun, with the sun sort of being a blend of them all. You know, you can approach it through thinking about the kinds of things that are going on with the energies of the sephira. You can do it with the colors of the sephira. So the energies would be sort of like coffee for Hod, maybe, or something, you know, stimulating for Hod, or for color-wise, it would be something orange, like melon or something like that. Xavier says, I found about you through chance at a local library here in Miami, which normally censor these types of materials. I checked out your book 25 times, LOL, until I finally purchased it. That's fantastic. I didn't know that any libraries had any of my books. That's kind of nice to hear. There's a lot of different approaches to it, and I wouldn't want to restrict your experience. One way of approaching that would be for you to actually do the pathworking a few times, so that you kind of enter into the final sephra and think about what that feeling that the sephra evokes for you, and then create a food and drink related thing for your final version. Rebecca says, ginger has been quite the beverage as a tea that helps me with the healing and dispelling of anything negative. And ginger, I think, would actually be fairly appropriate for Hod. It has that sort of spiciness to it, and yet it's got sort of an intellectual quality to it. Making a biscuit or cookie and frosting a sigil on it could work. Yeah, sure. Get some frosting of the appropriate color and draw on a planetary symbol or the symbol of the intelligence or the spirit, or or write in Hebrew the name of the sephra. That would be an approach too. So let's move on and talk for a little bit about the next path, the Path of Resh. And this path is interesting. And for those of you who are just coming in, this will be in the future. I would like you to work the initial 2 paths before you do this. And if you are coming in now at this point and you want to stay on target, try and do the first one 3 times or so, and the second one 3 times or so, and then start on this one and do it before the next class. And because of the fact that there's going to be a 2-week break, you should still be able to do that relatively, not even having to do it every day. Every other day, doing a pathworking would be fine. And if you want to do more than that, that's swell as well. So this next path is interesting because it doesn't start at Malkut anymore. It starts in Yesod. So the recording still starts you at Malkut, and then basically you are asked to raise your energy to the temple of Yesod. So you return to that violet-colored, purple-colored 9-sided temple, and you enter into it and begin your working from. You open the path from there. So this is a different kind of beginning, because you're actually starting by moving immediately up to another sephra, and this is going to happen after the next one, which is the path of Kof. All of them are not going to start at Malkut anymore. That'll be the last time that they start at Malkut. It'll start at higher and higher up the tree as we go along. So you're going to do the invocation, and then you're going to move through a series of temples as you progress up the tree to move further. This first one is just up to that first temple, and relatively easy, and something that actually, Graham, when you work, you're going to find that you are entering more into that trance state that's the ideal state as you do that, moving up into Yesod. Graham says, is it a good idea to have a short break between subsequent paths of a day or 2? Yeah, I mean, I could see that as a useful thing to do. These programs are they're it's interesting because they're both quite powerful, but I've really done my best to design them to also be fairly gentle in their impact. A few of the later ones, that's just not possible. But particularly at this phase, they're fairly benign in their result upon your consciousness. And this one is actually the Path of Resh is actually very pleasant in comparison with the Path of Sheen. There's still it's interesting because it approaches the same kind of territory, but at a slightly higher level. Instead of just focusing on your instinctive things, it focuses on your beliefs and your ideas about reality and your ideas about your doubts about your own progress, your doubts about yourself, and asks you to release those through the path. And so this is really the first one that requires you to really make an effort to get past some inherent things about yourself. The previous one began that process, but this one really kind of demands that you can sort of separate from your normal day-to-day self even more and more completely. So this one is probably going to be a little bit more of a challenge for some people, although I expect most of you will find it quite easy to do because it's not inherently different from the previous one. It's just simply asking a different category of things for you to kind of put up on the chopping block and move past for the moment. And the metaphor this time again, it focuses on lightly upon the tarot archetypes, but not overly so. I'll show you some more of the tarot images. I don't have mine at hand here. I misplaced my decks that I was going to use for this, but Golden Dawn version is quite similar to the one that I do in a lot of ways. This is one in which the Rider-Waite deck really kind of went away from what the Golden Dawn suggested. It's interesting. The Rider-Waite deck was designed by an artist named Pamela Smith under the instruction of A.E. Waite, similar to the way that the Thoth Tarot was done by Lady Frida Harris under the instruction of Aleister Crowley. And both of those gentlemen were members of the Golden Dawn, and so were influenced by that kind of the thinking of the Golden Dawn. But so the Golden Dawn one now, this is the Cicero Sun card, and it's fairly similar in a lot of ways to the Crowley Sun card, and the Boda Sun card is quite similar to that as well. The Rider-Waite deck takes a different stance and has just one singular little boy riding on a horse with a sort of victorious flag of Christ behind him. And of course, A.E. Waite was actually. Oh, I'll hold that up again. I mean, you guys can find these images online, I think, pretty easily. But so there's a little boy and a little girl. The girl's in water and the boy's on earth. There's a sort of hill with a fence. That's the sort of Golden Dawn imagery, and all of that is touched upon a little bit in my path working, but not to any great degree. The Path of Resh is a path of the self. It's a path of the ego consciousness. The astrological association with that path is the sun, And in astrology, the sun is the self. It's the I principle, the ego. And so what you're really moving through on your path to sort of pure reason towards pure mind is the ego, the self. This version of the card, again, there's a lot of similarities there. This is Aleister Crowley's version. You can see the two little people there, and they're actually more like fairies here, which you can't see too well. There's some zodiac signs around the edges. I think that's skipped in the Cicero version, but I do think that it's referenced in the Golden Dawn description of the lighting in here is not ideal for showing off cards, unfortunately. What's going to be interesting is that you're going to the same place that you did in the last one. The paths of Resh and Shin both lead up to Hod. So you're not going to be doing something fundamentally different, although you're going to be taking an entirely different route to it with entirely different stuff being worked on along the way. And so what I would like to hear from you next week when we get together is how differently your experience of this path was from the other one, how different Hod seemed from this perspective as opposed to the other perspective. So that's the thing to look out for, other than generally the transformations towards just a pure insight into the universe. So here's the Rider-Waite Sun card. Just a little boy and the flag and the sunflowers. And the wall is still there. Now it's just in the front, and he's riding on a horse. So that's the tarot's depiction of this path, and so the experience is basically getting past yourself, getting past your own accumulated stuff to be able to just connect directly with an insight into the universe. So, do we have questions? In many ways, I think that this one is easier than the last one, and probably because it's moving from that pleasant trance-like place of Yesod, the transition is a little bit less abrasive than moving from Malkut, which is the body, directly into that. So Alex says, looking forward to it. Brandine says, sounds very thrilling, inviting. Sorry, I switched those. Inviting, thrilling. Rebecca says, really happy that I can feel the change within. We'll take notes on the new experiences. Fantastic. So, I'm going to set this up. Looks like we've lost a couple of people in the last couple of minutes. I'm going to set this up for the recording to be available for people. And I guess that's it, unless anyone has any more questions. Yes, I want to let you know that feel free to contact me during the week. I may not be able to get back to you instantly, but I will get back to you. Roger, are you here? I'd be very happy to hear that. Wondering where you were, Roger. Anyway, I will. Rebecca says, "Give my adorable little daughter of mine a hug and kiss." Yeah, she hurt herself 2 days ago, but she got better the next day, so that was fantastic. She was hardly able to move, and all of a sudden she just was better. I think something popped back into place. So anyway, I will see you guys in 2 weeks, and we'll be back to Sunday in 2 weeks. Okay. So keep that in mind. This is normally going to be on Sundays, and it may occasionally have to be on Saturdays again, just depending on how things go. But Sunday is where we normally will be at 12:30 p.m. And it was wonderful seeing you all, and I will see you all in 2 weeks.